In this podcast episode, Ralph Pezzullo delves into his new self-published book about stolen elections and exposes a complex web of election fraud tied to Venezuelan and foreign regimes, particularly highlighting involvement by the Venezuelan government, China, Iran, and Russia. He shares insider insights from whistleblowers and discusses how powerful criminal cartels intertwine with election manipulation efforts, drug trafficking, and global political influence. The conversation also explores the role of U.S. intelligence, corporate interests, and the impact on American democracy and politics. Ralph Pezzullo explains that his latest book regarding stolen elections had to be self-published after Skyhorse publishers pulled out at the last moment, citing fears of lawsuits that could threaten their business. The book was based on detailed evidence compiled by whistleblowers, including a former DEA Special Operations Division source, Martin Rodil, a Venezuelan financial crimes expert. Rodil introduced Pezzullo to the dark underbelly of election fraud schemes linked to a Venezuelan-led network operating sophisticated voting machine software globally. Working alongside former CIA officer Gary Burnson, these whistleblowers invested millions and risked their safety to unveil this conspiracy. Pezzullo recounts connections to the sting operation that captured notorious Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout in Thailand. Rodil was involved in setting up this DEA sting and later transitioned into exposing election fraud through his expertise in financial crimes linked to international drug cartels. Both Rodil and Burnson leveraged their intelligence, law enforcement, and clandestine backgrounds to uncover fraud mechanisms embedded in voting technologies. Their shift exemplified how whistleblowers could strike at corruption by tapping undercover sources within criminal organizations. The narrative traces the origin of the fraudulent voting software back to Venezuela in the early 2000s under Hugo Chavez. Facing potential defeat in the 2004 referendum, Chavez reportedly collaborated with Cuban intelligence to develop software capable of manipulating election results. 3 Venezuelan computer engineers at Simon Bolivar University were recruited to design this system, initially deployed on touchscreen lottery machines as a testing ground. Successfully rigging the referendum in Chavez's favor, the software was further refined and turned into a tool for controlling elections both in Venezuela and abroad, effectively laying the groundwork for election hacking technology used internationally. Pezzullo reveals that the Venezuelan government-owned company Smartmatic became the global vehicle for infiltrating election systems. Using carefully disguised corporate structures, Smartmatic expanded into other countries, including the United States, often obscuring its Venezuelan ownership. The company won contracts by bribing officials and selling the veneer of an advanced, tamper-proof electronic voting system. Throughout Latin America and over 70 countries worldwide, this technology influenced election outcomes under the guise of modernization, hiding its vulnerabilities and backdoors built specifically for vote manipulation. As the Venezuelan program expanded, technical and financial support came from China, Iran, and Russia, forming a consortium of hostile nations exploiting election systems to undermine democratic processes globally. This coalition extended their reach into the United States by targeting strategic swing districts. The funding stemming from international drug trafficking operations enriched these coordinated efforts. The alliance not only corrupted elections, but propagated social unrest through financing contentious political and social movements such as Black Lives Matter and Open Society foundations, thereby exacerbating divisions within the U.S. An integral aspect of the scheme involves the Cartel de los Soles, an alleged cartel comprising high-ranking Venezuelan military and government officials who control drug trafficking networks in the Western Hemisphere. This group finances election interference and launders proceeds through complex networks involving legitimate enterprises such as Venezuela's state oil company, PDVSA. While they collaborate with Mexican drug cartels like the Sinaloa cartel to move narcotics into the U.S., the Cartel de los Soles operates as a shadow government, wielding military power and political influence to shield their criminal activities. According to Pezzullo, some factions within U.S. intelligence and law enforcement agencies are aware of this conspiracy, but institutional inertia, political compromises, and concerns about international ramifications have impeded aggressive action. The FBI was reportedly warned by whistleblowers who were then advised to hide their evidence and leave the country for fear of retaliation. Attempts to expose and litigate against this fraud, such as Fox News' costly lawsuit settlement with Dominion, further discouraged media and political entities from investigating or acknowledging the manipulation. The discussion highlights 14 separate backdoors embedded in the voting software, which allow extensive manipulation on multiple levels, from switching votes on touchscreen machines to exploiting mail-in ballots. The software tracks voter logs, enabling targeted fraud at the district level and precise planning to influence key swing regions where votes decide national outcomes. Moreover, the machines, often produced in China and labeled deceptively, e.g., made in Taiwan, are connected to servers in Serbia, operated on Huawei equipment, exposing election infrastructure to foreign cyber control. The whistleblowers initially briefed the Trump administration and Republican consultants such as Rudy Giuliani, cautioning delay until they could gather irrefutable evidence. However, premature public allegations like Sidney Powell's "Release the Kraken" campaign lacked substantiation, weakening the attempt to challenge the election results. Over 3 years, the investigators compiled comprehensive data and presented it to the FBI and Congress with little official pursuit. Whistleblowers then relocated their sources overseas to protect their engineers and continued the investigation privately, supported financially by backers like Overstock.com CEO Patrick Byrne. Pezzullo details how major American political figures have been both targets and beneficiaries of this system. Notably, he claims the 2008 Obama primary victory in Cook County was allegedly manipulated and quotes President Biden's rare admittance referencing the most highly advanced election fraud system in the world. The podcast uncovers how firms connected to corrupt foreign interests have penetrated U.S. election auditing and polling, casting doubt on purportedly independent investigations. The election system remains largely opaque and vulnerable, with entrenched interests resisting reform. The conversation touches on the deep entanglement between corrupt foreign regimes, criminal cartels, U.S. political operatives, and multinational corporations. Shadowy financial flows sustain lobbying groups, payoffs, and secure immunity for operatives within both Venezuela and the U.S. This nexus extends to influence streaming through high-level Washington law firms, political campaigns, and business alliances, eroding the integrity of democratic institutions. The whistleblowers' efforts highlight a hidden symbiotic relationship that undermines not only elections but also strategic stability. Pezzullo also discusses how these election schemes intersect with broader geopolitical concerns, including military cooperation between Venezuela, Iran, and China. Iran supplies technology and training for drone and missile bases in Venezuela, allegedly targeting Florida. Spying operations extend to intercepting critical communications cables in the Caribbean, with China playing a central role. The podcast explores how these developments coincide with shifting U.S. foreign policy and security challenges, involving complex intelligence battles and competing agendas within the U.S. government. The fallout of these international dynamics is illustrated at home by California's political and economic turmoil, which Pezzullo attributes partly to corrupt electoral mechanisms. Los Angeles County's elections, run by Smartmatic machines, produce questionable outcomes such as the surprising victories of local politicians. The state, despite having one of the largest economies globally, suffers from infrastructural decay, social disorder, and corporate flight. This microcosm underscores the erosion of democratic governance and raises concerns about electoral integrity at all levels. An important theme is the division within U.S. intelligence between official agents committed to lawful service and covert shadow factions engaging in covert manipulation and collaboration with foreign adversaries. Pezzullo reveals examples of Cuban espionage deeply embedded in U.S. government agencies and suggests that these internal fissures complicate efforts to expose and dismantle election interference operations. The challenges of confronting such embedded corruption in a bureaucratic and political system resistant to transparency come into sharp relief. Finally, Pezzullo reflects on ongoing hopes that forthcoming trials, such as those involving Venezuelan leaders like Nicolas Maduro and defectors like Hugo Carvajal, might expose the full scope of election rigging and international conspiracy. There is speculation about political leverage to be gained from such disclosures, including implications for future U.S. elections. However, the entrenched power of the networks involved and the reluctance of U.S. institutions to confront them leaves the path to reform uncertain and fraught with risk.